What do you mean, no?
No.
I return this blade to its rightful owner.
One doesn't speak unless one knows.
Okay. The Mandalorian Season 3 has made me feel like an insane person for the past couple months. Not necessarily because the season ended as quickly as it did, because there's a whole algorithm of YouTube videos from much bigger channels about that very problem, and I don't want to be the dead tauntaun here, but more so because this season tried to even exist in the first place when it was clear that there wasn't anything for it to say after episode 3. In a world where this is real, and this is also real, and it stays real inside of this thing that is also still real, it makes you stop to ask the one simple question that the entirety of Season 3 never actually attempted to ask in any definitive way, and that is, why do I exist? Because even though I've always been aware of some of its faults, The Mandalorian has provided me with some of the most digestible and inoffensive Star Wars experiences that always clicked universally with everyone, as it knew how to hit a little sweet spot in the forehead I like to call Silly Billy Lizard Brain, aka Average Star Wars Brain, aka being mindlessly entertaining without being stupid. But that's where this old speeder bike here starts to really diverge off the path and descend into a trash compactor, which makes me feel and say what I'm unfortunately about to say. While visually impressive and at times undeniably enjoyable, The Mandalorian Season 3 is a show that almost instantaneously doesn't give itself an actual reason on why it wants to be here, and quickly devolves into an exercise of narrative dissonance that doesn't even attempt to say a whole lot, and ultimately succeeds at saying nothing. Star Wars is for everyone, but it should not be written by everyone. And that is ultimately the thesis of this video. Much like how Obi-Wan Kenobi broke the mirage of endemic understanding in the handling of legacy characters, The Mandalorian Season 3 broke the trust of legacy viewers in the age of modern Star Wars storytelling, and did so in rather remarkable fashion. The worst decision The Mandalorian could have made for itself was to simply phone it in after a powerful and rewarding Season 2 finale, and unfortunately for this show that had so much going for it, that's exactly what it did. And why I need to profess that The Mandalorian has run its course and is dangerously outdated. Here's some context. If you've seen my videos before or you know my history with Star Wars, then you probably know that I'll like just about anything they put in front of me if they treat it with respect and attempt to elevate the world through 3 specific tenets, those being spectacle, action, and message. That last one, that's the one that always gets neglected. I love the original trilogy. I love the prequels, even with their dialogue. In January, I called Andor one of the greatest pieces of art Star Wars is now indebted to, and that video won an award. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. That's how much I love good Star Wars. Good Star Wars with soul and purpose is transformative, but what I don't love is when Star Wars attempts an interpretation of itself and makes it clear that it won't even show up to put in the work to say anything. When I first started watching The Mandalorian back in Season 1, I didn't feel any of this because other than Rogue One, it had been such a long time since I felt Star Wars had really tried to spread its wings and put more effort into something new for the first time. And that's what my silly Billy Lizard Brain saw in The Mandalorian. Din Djarin worked because he represented this canvas of infinite possibilities from a storytelling perspective, and any character with no discernible face is left up as an interpretation for the viewer, in the same way that Master Chief represents the soul of the player. And while people came and went through the following seasons and brought their side stories along with them, there was still the big overarching motivator of who is Din Djarin and why is his story important. But in order to get that motivator to work for multiple seasons of television, the writers had to introduce an even smaller motivator for the audience, something that would get our silly Billy Lizard Brains interested through filler and main plot lines while waiting for Din Djarin to be molded into a stronger protagonist. Over time, this would aim to move the interest of the story away from the smaller motivator and back into Din Djarin organically, like a little narrative osmosis machine. And that is where we come to our first original sin with The Mandalorian, and that is the introduction and long-lasting impact of Baby Yoda. So that little osmosis machine I mentioned prior, yeah, it worked as intended. We cared about Din Djarin's path towards protecting the child and keeping it safe from the Empire, and we cared about that up until it was time to let that storyline go naturally, which is what needed to happen. The introduction of Luke that rounded out Grogu's place in Din's story was the perfect closing chapter because Din had finally fulfilled his mission of protecting the child, and now it was time for him to reassess his place in his clan and his values in the world. Grogu served as the motivator to get Din Djarin into a place of nuance, and thus is the brilliance of Luke's inclusion in the Season 2 finale. I don't think people truly understand how well executed that finale was, because we can look back now and smile at the cameos, but in terms of wrapping up Grogu's story and paying off the waning interest of his relationship with Mando, it concluded the purpose of the smaller motivator and gave Mando a sense of spiritual enlightenment, something he was hunting for as a Mandalorian. Luke was not just the perfect cameo, but the necessary character to send both Grogu and Mando on their respective ways towards being of substance to the canon overall. And it all lined up perfectly. But all of the work that went into rounding that out had been erased the moment Boba Fett decided to hijack Mando's story and undo all of the progress that had been laid out, bringing us back to the same problem we had with Grogu in the first place. Grogu should have stayed with Luke indefinitely, leaving Season 2 intact and giving Grogu a purpose on his own, whilst affording Mando the space to finally start evolving as a character. By bringing Grogu back to Din's custody, you have essentially eroded all of the previous importance of the journey Mando and Grogu took together. You have essentially said that the first 2 seasons were meaningless, and if that is the case, then why in the world should I ever care about Mando in the first place? Having an older parental lead character and a child sidekick as your narrative focus works when there's a back and forth that builds up those characters over time. Look at Joel and Ellie as an example. The problem, however, for The Mandalorian is that there is none of that growth available, given that Baby Yoda can't communicate with Din on the intellectual level. So the secondary characters of the story have to become the anchors of interest when they weren't supposed to be. And outside of Bo-Katan, who gets a narrative pass because of years of prior buildup, the reality is that almost every other person who isn't Bo is excruciatingly one-dimensional, and thus it becomes apparent that the show is as well, making everything simply boring. The dialogue of Season 3 is paper-thin, the motivations are frustratingly unclear, the subtext is non-existent, and character motivations are so inconsistent that it becomes impossible to take anything seriously. This season cheated itself of any emotional payoff, of any intelligent conversations, of any nuanced investment from the audience, because it didn't even try to give us a story worth a damn. It's more than happy with surface-level amateurism on everything except its cinematography, because all it has to be is marketable, I guess. So many times throughout this season, I found myself asking the simple questions of, why do I even care about this? And if your audience is asking that 2 to 3 episodes in, you have lost your audience. Now, you're probably asking, why am I not going through individual episodes and talking about the larger picture? And that's because there is no larger picture here. I did look at the individual episodes. For the first 3 episodes, I even made a video, and it was that 3rd episode that reinforced the worries I had about this season going in, that there was no plan, and instead it became an opportunity to do something else. There is no story of actual substance in Season 3, and every legitimately interesting thread that was supposed to culminate in this season, like the return to Mandalore and Din's journey, or Bo's conflict with Din, or the right to the darksaber, it was all concluded in painfully unimaginative fashion. Season 3 of The Mandalorian is simply what it is, and that is a painfully unimaginative waste of time. I checked out after the conclusion of Din's journey to Mandalore, where the show subverts our expectations to instead show us a subplot on cloning in the New Republic, and that could not be more contrived or unnecessary. And I had to force myself to sit through the remaining 5 episodes. You know, at least with the disappointment that was Obi-Wan, I still had this dumb hope that by the finale there would be a miraculous change in quality and purpose, and we'd finally get the series we had hoped for. But with Mandalorian, this thing was dead on arrival the moment it decided to fix the sequel trilogy and thus not take itself seriously. There is a lack of subtext given to our main character who needs it most, and if he isn't evolving, then the story isn't evolving, and neither is my investment in this show, and it all just crumbles. When the lessons in character deconstruction are so bare bones that the entire plot for this season is finished by the 3rd episode, and the cause for conflict is never given any meaningful time to be fleshed out or treated with care, when it finally comes time to retake Mandalore, why would I even care about that destination when the rest of this story's journey didn't even care about the steps it took to get here? The payoff we deserved after 2 seasons of television was ignored, and the work they put in for this season was rushed through because we have to save the sequels. When I sit here and find myself wondering if Season 4 should just give Bo-Katan the reins to the show and follow her instead, which clearly would make for more interesting storytelling, that's when I know I've lost faith in this series and its main character. This show went from attempting to say a lot of things and ask a lot of questions to failing to say anything at all. And whenever it did choose to speak, it did so at an elementary level. And I am so tired of being treated like a kid. The Mandalorian Season 3 exists as a show in crisis. It's a series of episodes with characters that exist on no fundamental thematic level other than their titles and has no discernible identity other than saving the sequel trilogy. The ultimate sad reality here is that at the end of the day, all of these are problems that are entirely self-inflicted. Mandalorian Season 3 failed to deliver any meaningful insight into the evolution of Din's character arc as well as the world he operates in because it never once asked why he feels the need to re-establish his link with his roots in the first place. Is Din Djarin lonely? We don't know. Is he tired of being a babysitter to Grogu? We don't know. Is he accepting of his new role as a side character to rushed plot lines and still trying to figure out his place in his own society? We don't know. And that's the problem. I'm not angry. I'm not even annoyed anymore. I'm just simply disappointed. But I'm not disappointed because the show stopped writing interesting dialogue or that it created useless, laughable plot points to fill a runtime it knew it couldn't fill. Nor am I disappointed that I was whiplashed into a subplot about the New Republic and its cloning programs with two of the most dreadfully dull characters in the show's lifespan that completely and entirely destroy the very purpose of the New Republic's existence following Return of the Jedi. Nor am I disappointed that this series expedited its entire socio-political and cultural conflict that it established of importance through years of collaborative storytelling. Hell, I'm not even disappointed that it denied itself the progress it so easily built up just so that it could relegate its own existence to fixing the abomination that was the sequel trilogy. No. I am far beyond that now. What I'm really disappointed about, what I truly cannot wrap my head around, what makes me sit and pause during the writing of this script is that The Mandalorian simply stopped trying. And that is the most offensive thing you can do. I'm looking directly at you, Mandalorian, when I say this. You don't care about yourself anymore, and you not only wasted my time, but your own. And I cannot in good faith continue to give my energy to a series that is so blatantly against itself while saying nothing and remaining so frustratingly outdated. What the hell happened to you, Mandalorian? And as always, thanks for watching.